You want to stand on your hands because standing on your feet isn't good enough for you. And defying the evolutionary standard humans have developed over millennia is a goal of yours for some reason. But instead of spending 2 agonizing years failing and trying and failing and trying only to realize that you've been doing it wrong this whole time and then finally getting the handstand, I'll make sure you have your handstand within a month if you pay attention. This is probably the most info-packed video about the handstand on the internet. So here are some timestamps for future reference. First, we've got the prerequisites of a handstand. First of all, we've got strength requirements. The handstand doesn't actually take a lot of strength if you do it properly, but the handstand is a pushing skill using your shoulders. So a good rule of thumb is to be proficient at push-ups, at least around 15 push-ups, and then shoulder endurance. If you don't have the endurance to hold yourself in a handstand against a wall for at least a minute, you're not going to have the endurance for training the handstand for hours at a time. You're just going to burn yourself out and probably hurt yourself. And next we've got mobility requirements. This is in your shoulders and your wrists. For the shoulders, you do need a decent amount of overhead mobility, so you're able to shrug your shoulders up into that handstand position to form a straight line. If you don't have that straight line, you're going to have issues, to say the least. For your wrists, the handstand is very taxing on the wrists, so you need a decent amount of wrist mobility and strength. Not a very fun position your wrists want to be in, so you want to be comfortable in that position before you start training the handstand. And now we have the anatomy of our handstand. This is the proper handstand form and all of the mental cues to keep track of while in the handstand. Starting off with our hands, we have a comfortable shoulder width or slightly wider apart. Just as a disclaimer, I did warm up my wrists before pressing record. It's not like I just pressed record and can handstand right off the bat. I did warm up my wrists beforehand. So we'll warm up before your training, but if you lack in shoulder mobility, you're going to want to go a little wider, because then the strain overhead is a lot less taxing if your hands are wider. Now going from your wrists to your shoulders, this is where the overhead mobility comes into play, because you want to have your hands stacked on top of your shoulders, with your shoulders being able to form a straight line with your body. This is called shoulder elevation. It is your ability to bring your arms up and then shrug your shoulders up to give you the proper mobility to form that straight line. If you don't have proper shoulder engagement, or even just the mobility to reach overhead, this is what results in what is called a banana handstand. This is improper shoulder elevation versus this. If you don't have proper shoulder elevation, it results in a banana handstand, as shown. Versus if you have proper shoulder engagement and trap engagement, shrugging your shoulders up and imagining you're reaching directly overhead rather than in front of you. Don't imagine this, but imagine this. One of the biggest things to consider is if your traps are engaged or not. If your traps aren't engaged, you're probably not shrugging up enough, causing an improper form. So before you go into your kick up to handstand, you're going to want to not only shrug your shoulders up, but make sure that your traps are engaged so you know that you're shrugging directly up and not just protracting your shoulders forward. Then alongside your wrist placement and your stacked shoulders, you want to try to drive your hips above everything so your joints stack in a nice straight line, as shown. Another important thing to consider is that you want to be looking at the ground the whole time, not towards the camera recording you. I just did that so I could show off a little. What's the point of watching a video of me showing you how to do a handstand if I can't show off the fact that I can do a handstand? There are really only 2 handstand surfaces that beginners should even consider, that being the floor and parallettes. Each surface having their pros and cons, starting with the floor. Floor handstands are where most people learn their first handstand, it being more accessible and a more natural handstand position. Training the handstand on the floor will also result in stronger wrists, but that is only because it requires more flexibility and wrist strength to actually perform. Because in a floor handstand, your wrists are at a very disadvantageous position, that 90-degree angle that the position places your wrists. This puts your wrists under a lot of pressure in one of its most stretched positions. This can cause a lot of strain, if not pain, if you don't have the right flexibility to have that range of motion unlocked and comfortable for you, but also having the wrist strength to actually push forward and balance in the handstand. If you don't have the proper mobility or wrist strength to hold a floor handstand, then it could severely hinder your progress, as it did mine. In a floor handstand, the only thing you have contact with is, well, your hands. So to prevent your overbalance and your underbalance, you're going to press with your fingers and your palms to balance. If you're starting to fall forward, you're going to want to relieve pressure from your wrists and press with your fingers so you go back to your balance window. If you're starting to fall backwards, you relieve pressure from your fingers and put more pressure on your wrists to go back into your balance window. Something to consider is that while in the handstand, you probably want slightly bent fingers so you can apply more pressure to the fingers versus if your hands were outstretched. I can't really place a lot of pressure on my fingers versus if I bend them, I can press a lot harder. While in your balance window, you want the most surface area of your hand to be on the ground. So you want your fingers to be spread out, and then while balancing, having most of your weight on the 4 corners of your palm, or just simply resting in the middle of your palm. Like this. Meanwhile, parallettes is a lot different. While they're not as accessible and not as a natural of a position as a floor handstand is, being that you require equipment to actually do the handstand, making it less accessible and slightly more expensive to even train the handstand. The parallettes are significantly easier on the wrists, placing your wrists at a neutral wrist position versus the very stretched wrist position that the floor handstand places your wrists. This can be very advantageous for people with current wrist pain and need to condition their wrists to perform the floor handstand. If you don't have the mobility and strength to do the floor handstand, practicing balance on parallettes can be essential for not having to take months to even start training the handstand because your wrists are too weak. Balancing on the parallettes is a lot different than balancing on the floor, and this has a lot to do with our wrist placement. On the floor, we would use our fingers and our hand heels or our wrists to balance our underbalance and overbalance. On the parallettes, we would use our ulnar and radial deviation to balance on the parallettes. If we were to overbalance, we want to press like this, press forward to bring us back to that balance equilibrium, versus if we were to underbalance, we want to press with the back of our palm to bring us back to our balance window, shown here. What a lot of people think about when they say training the handstand is simply throwing their feet up in the air and balancing on their hands. But what not a lot of people realize is the fact that the handstand kick-up and the handstand hold are two completely different skills and should be treated as such. The handstand kick-up is the ability to kick up into the proper handstand position every time. Meanwhile, the handstand hold is being able to actually balance it and manipulate it at your will. The handstand kick-up being only one of many entries that people can use to enter into a handstand. It being the most common among beginners because of how simple it is and its very, very limited strength requirements. So if the handstand kick-up and the handstand hold are two separate skills, how do you do each? So first, the quality of your kick-up determines the quality of your handstand. If your kick-up form is off, your handstand form is going to be off. While in the kick-up, you want to make sure you have your shoulders stacked on top of your wrists, your shoulders elevated, and then you are going to pick a leg to kick up with. This leg is probably going to be your dominant leg. You have this leg bent because it is going to kick you up into the handstand position, while your other leg remains straight and remains straight in your handstand. You are going to use your kicking leg to create the momentum while your other leg swings up, carrying that momentum, swinging you into the position. So how do we actually train the kick-up? Well, we're going to be using the wall. The wall is our friend. It is straight, it is unmoving, and you can fling yourself at it, and it's not going to go anywhere. I don't have very many clear walls in my place of residence, so I'm going to be using my bedroom door. The first movement we're going to use to train the kick-up is kick-ups to the wall. Now, this is going to help you get used to where your straight line is, so your body knows where to stop and where your equilibrium is. You're going to want your hands a little distance away from the wall, and you are going to want to kick up using all of the form cues we talked about earlier, and then just lightly touch the wall until you're in your straight handstand. Now, at first, your wall kick-ups are probably gonna look something like this, or like this. That is fine. You are just not used to where your equilibrium is. Each time you kick up, you are going to want to touch the wall lighter and lighter, bringing us to our next movement, kick-ups on the wall without touching the wall. After you've gotten a good sense of where your equilibrium is, you're going to want to kick up to the wall without actually touching the wall. Why we're doing it against the wall? Well, you don't want to fall over. At first, your kick-ups without touching the wall are probably gonna look something like this. Or like this. And for everyone that's about to go in the comments and say, that's not how you train the handstand. This is how you train the entry into the position, not actually balancing it. That we'll go over later. Another skill, just as important, if not more important than how to kick up into the handstand, is knowing how to properly bail from a handstand. This will help you not only get over the fear of falling and the fear of being upside down, but also protect you if you do fall. First, when performing a bail, you want to pick a side to actually bail on. Most commonly, this is going to be your non-dominant side. When overbalancing, you want to cartwheel to the side so you don't fall flat on your back and severely hurt yourself. It's not fun. You're probably not gonna know how to do this yet, and your fear of being upside down is probably going to prevent you from actually having the courage to kick up and then being, oh shit, and then falling over. So what you can do to practice is that you can practice with smaller, different cartwheels, slowly kicking higher and higher. Katie, baby, get out of here. Until you know how to cartwheel from a full handstand. A very bad habit some people can develop when training the handstand is throwing their hand up to try to catch your balance. This is a very unhealthy habit that can be caused by either lack of space to actually perform the cartwheel. I would know, I've done several dozen handstands in my bedroom, or simply not knowing how to bail. This is a very unhealthy habit some people can develop. Not only can it hurt your wrists with the sudden pressure, but it can also hurt your shoulder, because with that sudden release in pressure and then intense pressure, this could lead to you releasing your shoulder elevation. And if your shoulders, if your arms are pointed directly upward as they should be, and then you lose shoulder elevation, this could severely hurt your shoulders, because if you lose shoulder elevation, your arms should go down. But if your arms are still up, you could hurt yourself. So learn how to properly bail from your handstands. And now that we've gone over how to kick up into the handstand, we can talk about how to actually balance the handstand. This is where a lot of people get stuck, and is where most people type into the YouTube search bar when they're struggling with their handstand. Putting it in simple terms, there's two ways to fall in a handstand. You've got your overbalance, which is the scary one, and then you've got your underbalance, the annoying one. Overbalance is caused when your center of mass falls too far forward, causing you to fall over. But underbalance is caused by improper alignment in all of your joints, causing you to fall backward. When going into overbalance, you want to press with your fingers as much as you can. Try not to bend your whole body in an overbalance, because then when pulling back, your legs are going to whip backwards, pulling you into underbalance. So going into overbalance, you simply really just want to train your fingers to push you back, and then keeping your lower body in check with your core and glutes engaged, having proper alignment. When falling into underbalance, you want to release pressure from the fingers so you're not continuing to push yourself backwards into underbalance. And then while using your wrists to push yourself, you are going to drive your shoulders slightly forward so your center of mass stays above your anchor point, your hands, so you can remain balanced. To go back into balance equilibrium, your balance window, you're going to press your shoulders while trying to return to your straight line. And look at that, we're back to the wall with how to balance your handstand. We're going to keep this simple because there's a lot of movements online and it can be quite confusing. So first of all, we want to train our overbalance, the scary one. To prevent overbalance, we are going to perform finger presses. So getting up into the handstand position, we are going to lightly place our feet on the wall while pressing with our fingers to bring ourselves off of the wall. Your first reps are probably gonna look something like this, pressing off and into underbalance. But your main goal should be going into the back to wall handstand and then being able to press out of it into the freestanding handstand. Now, very similar to what we did with the back to wall and the finger presses, to train our underbalance, we are going to do chest to wall movements called foot pullaways. Now, before you go into a chest to wall handstand, you need to make sure that you can bail out of the handstand first, because falling backward is not an option. So make sure that you know how to not hurt yourself. Getting into the chest to wall position, we're going to walk our hands up, form our straight line, and then we're going to pull our shoulders forward, and then our feet should gradually leave the wall and come with us. If they don't, you're not pulling your shoulders forward. You can easily do these pushaways and pullaways for reps, or even trying to hold the position that you put yourself in when correcting the movement. For example, in your overbalance, you could try to not correct yourself into the freestanding handstand, but try to sort of keep pressure on your fingers. Same with your foot pullaways. You could even just try to lean forward and stay in that position before going up into the freestanding handstand, like so. Now there's a lot of back to wall and chest to wall movements that you'll see online. Pretty much just choose one to train underbalance, overbalance, and maybe even one that'll train your balance endurance. But keep it simple, don't overexert yourself. It takes practice. And now that you know everything there is to know about the standard kick up to handstand and the handstand hold, since you've made it this far, I've got a shit ton of tips for you. The number one tip is that no one handstand hack, this magical form correction, or this one movement, no one hack will get you the handstand more than hours of practice and hundreds of attempts. Nothing will give you a more understanding of how the handstand works other than actually being upside down and playing with gravity. Unless, of course, you're me and you didn't have this video when you started out and you didn't even know how the handstand works. So when kicking up into the handstand, you are momentarily in misbalance because you are purely using momentum to drive yourself into the handstand. So in order to make your kick-ups cleaner, a good tip is to limit the amount of time that you are not under control by bringing your kicking foot slightly closer to your hands so you can just drive straight up into that handstand. Of course, don't take this too literally. Take it with a slight grain of salt because you're not going to be able to handstand with your leg all the way up here. Come on. When kicking up into the handstand, imagine your body as one unit. Don't just throw your feet up and expect God to bless you with balance. What you want to do is keep your legs straight and then try to drive your hips above your shoulders, because this is where your moment of balance will kick in. Don't shoot your feet up. Swing your pelvis and your legs above your hands. If you want more consistent kick-ups, because sometimes you kick up into the position and sometimes you just don't, keep everything else consistent. Keep your hand placement the same every kick-up. Keep your focal point, where your eyes are pointing, consistent every kick-up. Keep the leg that you're pushing with consistent every kick-up, and etc. Keep your shoulders stacked while doing the kick-up to prevent swinging backward into a banana handstand. Make sure your shoulders are stacked first in the pike position and then kick up into the handstand. With prolonged handstand training, you are going to notice that your hands are a lot more perceptive than you think. If your hands are sending you signals, don't ignore them, because it could be the difference between bouncing and falling over. If you don't quite notice that you're overbalancing yet, but your fingers are starting to kick in, don't ignore it, or else you're going to overbalance. But instead, when you're first training the handstand, you're going to have to make the conscious decision to press forward and back into your balance window. The more you train the handstand and the longer you're in the handstand position, the more natural this is going to feel and the less of a conscious effort it's going to become. Eventually, you will be able to balance without even thinking at all. And that is it for today's video. If you have a question about anything, leave it down in the comments and I will make sure to get back to you. In the meantime, go watch this video that I picked out specifically for you. And as always, gravity is just a guideline.